I was in a coffee shop last week waiting for my order. The barista finally calls out, "Latte for Kim," and I watched as 3 different women, all sitting at separate tables, instinctively looked up at the exact same moment. It's a common scene, but it made me think. I pulled up my phone and scrolled through my own contacts. I have a Kim, a Kimmy, a Kimmy, and a Kimberly. Then I got to the V's. I've got a Victoria, 2 Vickies, a Victor, and a Vicky. It looks deliberate, like I'm consciously building some kind of weird collection, but I'm not. So why does this happen? Why do our inner circles and phone lists keep filling up with the same handful of names over and over again? It turns out it's not magic, and it's not personality astrology. It's our brains, running a secret election inside our relationships, constantly voting for the familiar, usually without ever asking our permission.
That whole scene, that is a perfect way to jump into this. Because that secret election you're talking about, it's really at the heart of our deep dive today.
It feels like something is going on just under the surface.
It is. What you're seeing in your contacts list is, it's the result of these 2 incredibly powerful psychological mechanisms. The first is called the Familiarity Heuristic.
Okay.
And the second is the mere exposure effect. These 2 things are, well, they're the engines running that entire election, telling us what to like, who to trust, everything.
Secret election. I love that framing. So let's unpack that first one. The Familiarity Heuristic. It sounds kind of obvious, right? We like what we know, but what's actually happening in the brain?
Right. It feels intuitive.
Yeah.
But to really get it, we need to start with what a heuristic even is. Think of it as a mental shortcut, a rule of thumb.
A quick and dirty rule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Super high speed, very efficient. It's for when the brain needs to make a fast judgment and doesn't have time for a full analysis. This particular one, the Familiarity Heuristic, it comes from the work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky.
On the availability heuristic, right. I remember that. The idea that we judge how likely something is based on how easily an example comes to mind.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And familiarity is like putting a turbocharger on availability. If something's familiar, it's not just available, it's instantly there.
Okay.
So the brain just assigns it preference. It's a simple, powerful rule. The familiar is almost always favored over the novel. And this is all about saving cognitive energy.
So the basic formula is just familiar equals easy and easy equals preferred.
That's it. And you see this most when the brain is already working hard. When you're stressed or busy or distracted, that's what we call high cognitive load.
So instead of building a new solution from scratch, the brain just says, hey, this looks like that other thing. Let's just use that old solution.
Yes, it pulls up an old mental schema, a past behavior, and uses it as a scaffold. It's assuming that because the situations feel similar, the results will be too. It's efficient, but
not always accurate.
Not always, no.
Yeah.
But efficiency is the brain's #1 job. It is always, always trying to save power.
Okay, so that's the heuristic. It's an active shortcut. What about the other half, the mere exposure effect? You said that was different.
Yeah, it's much more subtle. The heuristic is a rule you sort of apply. Mere exposure is. It's about the quiet power of repetition. It's conditioning that happens when you're not even paying attention.
This is the thing where the more you see something, the more you like it, even if you don't really interact with it. Passive exposure leading to active preference.
That's the one. It's often called the familiarity principle. You don't need a reward. You don't need to analyze anything. Just repeated encounters.
Yeah.
With a word, a face, a song, it's enough. Simply seeing it over and over is enough to build an affinity for it.
And the person who really pioneered this was the psychologist Robert Zijonk, wasn't it? Back in the 60s.
That's him. And the Zijonk noticed something really fundamental about how we react to new things.
Which is what?
The very first time you encounter something truly novel, your first reaction is almost always fear or avoidance. It's an evolutionary thing, a caution mechanism. The unknown could be dangerous.
Sure, that makes sense.
But then, with the second exposure, there's a little less fear. The third, even less. Until, eventually, you actually start to develop a fondness for it.
So if it doesn't kill us after a few tries, our brain decides it must be okay and then starts to actually like it.
You got it. And the most mind-bending part of Zijonk's work was his idea that preferences need no inferences.
Preferences need no inferences. I love that.
It means the feeling of liking something happens before conscious thought. The emotion comes first.
So how did he prove that? That you can like something without even knowing you've seen it?
He used a device, a tachistoscope, that flashes images very, very quickly. He would show people these stimuli at what are called suboptimal thresholds.
Meaning so fast you can't consciously register them?
Exactly. The people on the study couldn't tell you if they'd seen the image before. They had no conscious memory of it. And yet, When they were later asked to rate those images against completely new ones, they consistently rated the ones they'd been subliminally exposed to more positively. The emotional bias was there, even though the conscious mind was completely in the dark.
So the feeling just arrives, fully formed,
Yeah.
before the analytical part of the brain can even catch up. That feels so fundamental.
It is. They've even seen it in animals. There was this one study with chicken eggs. They played tones of 2 different frequencies while the chicks were still in the egg.
Okay.
After they hatched, the chicks would consistently choose the tone that was played to them before they were born. The preference was literally baked in.
Just from passive auditory exposure. That's incredible. And what's the classic human example of this, the big demonstration of near presence?
For that, you have to look at the Götzinger experiment. 1968, Oregon State University. It is the perfect social demonstration of this effect.
What did he do?
He had a student attend a class every single day. The catch was the student was completely inside a giant black bag. All you could see were his feet. He just sat there on a table at the back in total silence.
A giant black bag. I can't imagine a more jarring or novel thing to see in a college lecture.
And that was exactly the point. The initial reaction from the class was hostility, suspicion, ridicule. That classic fear and avoidance response to something new and weird.
Of course.
But over the semester, just by being there, just by being present day after day, the class's attitude completely shifted.
From hostile to what?
They went from hostility to acceptance, then to curiosity, and by the end, they were actually friendly and protective of the student in the bag.
So he went from being this alien thing to a classmate, a friend, just by showing up silently in a bag.
Yes, and that's the perfect transition, because the brain didn't change its analysis of the bag. It changed its feeling about it. It found a way to translate that presence into a positive reward.
And that reward has a name, right? Perceptual fluency.
That's it. The brain basically sees easy as a reward in itself.
Let's dig into that. Why does the brain automatically label something that's easy to process as...
Perceptual fluency is just the technical term for how easily and quickly the brain processes something familiar. And the research is really clear. The more fluent the processing, the more positive effect you feel. That liking is directly tied to the ease of processing.
So when I see the name Kim in my contacts or a logo I recognize, my brain doesn't have to work. That lack of effort creates this little warm glow.
A warm glow, exactly.
And I mistakenly attribute that good feeling to the name or the logo itself, not to my own brain's efficient processing.
That's the mechanism in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And we can see this physically in the brain. fMRI scans show a clear split. Familiar situations, the ones where you can use those fast heuristics, they light up the frontal and temporal lobes. That's your quick, intuitive reasoning system.
And if it's new.
If it's totally unfamiliar and requires, a step-by-step logical breakdown, the brain switches gears. It engages a different system, mainly in the frontal and parietal lobes. They're biologically separate processes. You can literally see the brain working harder.
That's fascinating. And what about the flip side? The idea that a positive emotion can actually create a feeling of familiarity, even if it's not there.
Yeah, the warm glow heuristic. This is where things like attraction get tangled up with familiarity and create all sorts of biases.
How so?
Well, in some studies, they showed people faces and asked them to rate how familiar they were. And people consistently rated the faces they found more attractive as being more familiar.
Even if they'd never seen them before.
Even with zero prior exposure. The logic is reversed. The brain thinks, I like this, it feels good, so I must know it.
We assume the good thing is the known thing. It's a powerful shortcut.
A very powerful one. And it leads directly into another bias. Hindsight bias.
Ah, the I knew it all along effect. How does familiarity play into that?
It's the same core principle. Hindsight bias is our tendency to see past events as way more predictable than they actually were. Once something happens, the outcome becomes familiar. It's easy to access in your memory. It's fluent. And because it's so fluent, your brain incorporates it into your original memory of the event.
So you rewrite history in your own head to make yourself seem smarter.
You do. You use that now familiar outcome to convince yourself you had the insight all along. It's a biased reconstruction. The moment something becomes fluent in your memory, your brain retroactively decides it was more predictable and more important than it was.
Okay, this all paints a picture of a brain that is just desperate for the easy, familiar path. But there have to be limits, right? Does the liking just keep going up forever?
No, absolutely not. There are very clear limits. The biggest one is just overexposure.
Okay.
The liking doesn't increase infinitely. It follows what we call an inverted U shape. It goes up, hits a peak, and then starts to go down.
So there's a sweet spot, a perfect dose of familiarity.
Exactly. Most studies find that sweet spot is somewhere between, say, 10 and 20 exposures. After that, you get diminishing returns.
Yep.
Too many repetitions, and you get boredom, irritation, cognitive fatigue.
The catchy pop song effect. You love it the first 20 times, and by the 100th time, you can't stand it.
That's the mere exposure effect in reverse. Total oversaturation.
And what about the context? Does this work for all kinds of decisions?
No, it's pretty context specific.
Yeah.
The research suggests the familiarity heuristic is most powerful for habitual, low-stakes decisions, things you do in a stable, routine environment.
Like buying groceries.
Right. For complex, high-stakes decisions, buying a house, for example, your brain is much more likely to switch on those logic systems and override the simple familiarity shortcut.
Okay, final limit. What if you already dislike something? Does hearing that annoying song more make you like it?
It's a great question, and the answer is usually no. Repeated exposure tends to just amplify whatever attitude you started with.
So good gets better and bad gets worse.
Pretty much. If you already have negative feelings about something, more exposure is more likely to increase your hostility than change your mind. It just reinforces that initial negative starting point.
That makes a ton of sense. The brain is just reinforcing its own patterns, which I guess brings us right into the world of commerce, where this whole system is leveraged for massive profit.
Oh, the application in marketing is enormous. Once a brand becomes familiar, it triggers that subconscious rule in the consumer. I bought this before. It was probably a good choice. I should do it again. That's brand familiarity. That's why companies spend billions on just getting their name out there.
It's not just about repeat business, though. It's about reducing risk, isn't it?
Absolutely. A familiar product feels safer. It commands a higher value in your mind because that flash of recognition reduces the perceived cognitive risk. You don't have to think, you don't have to evaluate, you just choose.
And this plays out in some really high-stakes areas like medicine.
Yes, the medical field is a perfect example of familiarity trumping facts. People will frequently ask for a specific name brand drug they've seen advertised.
Even when the generic is identical.
Identical, just as effective, and way cheaper. But the brand name is familiar, and that familiarity acts as a kind of borrowed trust. It overrides a rational assessment of the actual facts.
That idea of borrowed trust is huge. It ties directly into this case study I came across about cognitive friction in branding.
Right, the difference between something being smooth in the brain versus clunky. That difference can decide who wins in the market.
So the story goes, there were two tech startups. One called itself Syncly. The other was named Affilgard Solutions.
Okay, I can already see where this is going.
Right. Now, Affilgard was, by all accounts, a solid product, maybe even a little better on a technical level, but Syncly just completely crushed them from day one.
And it all came down to the name, to fluency.
Exactly. Syncly is smooth. It sounds like synchronize and simply. It has what's called high name fluency, zero effort for the brand to process. Affilgard Solutions, on the other hand,
Cognitive friction.
instantly. You pause. You're not sure how to say it. And that tiny hesitation is all it takes for your subconscious to favor the easier path. The ease of processing Syncly was unconsciously translated into quality and trustworthiness.
And that's a key lesson for anyone in that space. If your product is a low-involvement purchase, something people don't spend hours researching, then fluency and familiarity become the most dominant cues for whether people accept it or not.
But in the digital age, this has been, well, it's been weaponized. The algorithms have created what one writer called the comfortable suffocation of algorithmic ease.
That is a brilliant phrase. It perfectly captures the paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Algorithmic targeting is ruthlessly efficient at giving you what you already like. It creates these powerful conditioning systems based on repetition.
And it feels like you're in control, like you're making choices.
But really, your options are being narrowed. It's reinforcing your existing preferences, killing any chance for serendipity or discovering something new. It's a feedback loop.
So the autonomy we feel is kind of an illusion. The algorithm is just feeding our familiarity bias on a massive scale.
Exactly. And if the only goal is satisfying your existing preferences, you end up in a behavioral box. You stop seeing new ideas, new products. It can even automate and reinforce inequality or extreme views by only showing you things that confirm what you already believe.
And what makes it worse is that we have no idea how these algorithms work. They're black boxes.
And that lack of transparency destroys trust. When users can't understand why they're seeing certain content, they start to engage in avoidance behaviors. They get suspicious, they pull back.
So how do you fix that? How do you fight the echo chamber?
The main strategy people are pushing for is to intentionally inject randomness and diversity back into the recommendations.
Reintroduce serendipity.
Yes. Force the system to show you things that aren't perfectly optimized for your past behavior. That and a push for what are called explainable algorithms. Ethical frameworks that require some level of accountability so you can understand the basic logic of why you're being shown something.
It's about giving power back to the user, not just mining their attention.
Exactly. Which brings us to another huge shift in the digital world, the whole idea of trust itself, and how it's changed because of electronic word of mouth, EWAM.
Right. Reviews, social media posts.
It's a massive shift. Trust used to be top-down. The brand advertised, and you either trusted the brand or you didn't. Now it's completely decentralized. It's a peer network.
Customers talking to customers.
And for many industries like travel or restaurants, those peer reviews are infinitely more powerful than any ad campaign. The brand's narrative is no longer just what they say it is. It's co-created by everyone who uses it.
So familiarity isn't just about seeing a logo 100 times. It's about seeing 100 people you don't know all saying the same thing.
Precisely. It's the familiar voice of the crowd. And how much you trust that crowd is highly dependent on your cultural background.
How does culture change the impact of online reviews?
Well, you see a big difference between what we call high context and low context cultures. In high context cultures where social proof and relationships are really important, EWAM is incredibly influential. A good review is a strong social endorsement.
Okay.
But in low context cultures like the US or parts of Western Europe, people tend to treat online reviews more as just data points, information to be considered, but without that deep relational power.
That's really interesting. So whether it's a name, a brand, or a review, the brain is always looking for that familiar social cue to make its decision easier. Which brings us right back to people, to those high-stakes social choices where we borrow trust from our past.
Yes, moving from how we recognize brands to how we recognize people. This is where that psychological curation of names can inject huge measurable bias into our professional lives.
And that hiring story is a perfect example. I heard about a manager, let's call him Mark, who was hiring for a pretty senior role. He had it narrowed down to 2 candidates. Both were fantastic. But he ended up choosing the guy named James, even though the other candidate looked slightly better on paper.
And his reason for such an important decision.
When he was asked about it, he just said that the name James felt reliable. He couldn't explain it, but the name itself just gave him this deep sense of comfort and competence.
And did he ever figure out why?
He did. He realized later that James was the name of his first ever mentor, the person who taught him everything when he started his career, his most trusted, reliable guide.
So he was borrowing trust. He unconsciously took the trust he had for his mentor and applied it to a total stranger just because they shared a name.
That's it. And that's the psychological curation you're talking about. It's not just that James is a common name. It's that his personal emotional history gave that specific name a huge amount of psychological weight. The bias was personal.
Exactly. The names you collect aren't just a random sample. They're filtered through your unique emotional history. If you had a great experience with a reliable Kim, the next Kim you meet gets an unconscious head start.
Your nervous system relaxes a little. They get a dose of borrowed trust without earning it.
They do. And the opposite is just as powerful. The negative association.
The permanent caution label.
Yes. If you had a really bad experience with, say, someone named Tyler, that name now carries a warning. It's still familiar, but in this case, it overrides the drive for efficiency. Instead of relaxing, you tense up. You pause.
Your brain is running a threat assessment based on the name alone.
It's your old data trying to protect you in the present, forcing you to slow down and gather more information before you make a judgment. And this whole mechanism can lead to some really deeply ingrained negative patterns, especially in our intimate relationships.
Right. This is where it gets really risky. How does seeking familiarity lead people into bad relationship patterns?
It's because our subconscious can easily confuse the feeling of familiar with the feeling of safe.
They are not the same thing.
Not at all. People can find themselves drawn to partners who have the same names or the same traits as people who hurt them in the past. They aren't consciously looking for trauma. They're seeking a neural pattern that is deeply familiar. Because the habit loop is known, it's misinterpreted as manageable or safe.
And it takes a huge amount of conscious effort to break that loop.
A huge amount. And once you notice a pattern like, wow, I date a lot of people named Ashley, your brain actually starts working to confirm that narrative.
How so?
It's a confirmation bias. You remember the Ashleys that worked out, and you forget the ones that didn't. So the next Ashley you meet gets an extra bit of attention, an extra inch or extra pause, because she fits the story you've told yourself. And over time, that pattern becomes the fabric of your social circle.
So we've gone from a simple mental shortcut to this deep force that's rooted in our personal history. And now we have to go even deeper, right, into the actual wiring, the neurobiology that connects familiarity to value and reward.
This takes us into the core structures of the brain, specifically the basal ganglia. And what scientists have found is pretty remarkable. The ancient brain system we use to remember the value of objects is the same system we use to form social bonds and recognize familiar faces.
So recognizing my favorite mug and recognizing my best friend's face might be using some of the same neural hardware.
That's the core idea. It's a region called the striatum. And more specifically, the tail end of the striatum seems to be crucial for both recognizing familiar faces and for assigning long-term stable value to things.
It's a common mechanism for valuing things, whether they're people or objects.
And it's vital for survival. You can see the evidence from studies on monkeys.
What did they find?
Researchers showed them photos of their familiar caregivers versus total strangers. And the neural activity in a part of the striatum called the caudate nucleus was really strong for the familiar faces, but weak for the strangers.
Okay.
But here's the kicker. They found that the exact same neurons also lit up when encoding the stable value of objects.
Wow. So social familiarity is literally coded in the brain as a form of reward, using the same circuits that tell us which fruit is good to eat or which tool is useful.
It allows for that split-second identification of valuable individuals, like a caregiver, which is critical when you're young. Social information and reward information are deeply intertwined in the brain's motivational circuitry.
So let's talk about the fuel for that circuitry, the neurochemistry. This is where dopamine and oxytocin come in.
Yes. The crosstalk between dopamine, or DA, and oxytocin, OT, is what really ignites the bond. It's the neurochemical foundation. This happens mostly in the nucleus accumbens, part of the ventral striatum.
And they each do something different. What's dopamine's job?
Dopamine is the engine. It's about motivation. Phasic dopamine is what processes reward timing and anticipation. It gives you the vigor to pursue a connection. It's the action-oriented drive, the get up and go of love.
It provides the energy. So how does oxytocin direct that energy?
Oxytocin is the compass. It guides that raw dopamine energy toward a specific social goal, like bonding with a partner. It does a couple of things. First, it makes the dopamine system more sensitive to social rewards.
It fine-tunes it for social connection.
Exactly. But maybe even more importantly, oxytocin turns down the volume on the amygdala, the brain's fear center. It reduces fear and makes you more willing to approach someone.
It lowers your guard so you can get close enough to form a bond.
It creates a state that scientists call immobility without fear. It lets you drop your defenses and consolidate that bond into a stable, valued relationship. Dopamine gives the drive. Oxytocin provides the safety to act on it.
And when those two are working together, that's when we see this manifest on the outside as biobehavioral synchrony.
Yes, and this is way more than just getting along. Biobehavioral synchrony is the literal coordination of biological processes, heart rhythms, hormone release, and behaviors like eye contact and vocal tone between two people.
So our bodies are actually getting in sync with each other.
They are. The combination of oxytocin and dopamine makes that experience of synchrony feel incredibly rewarding. In studies of parents and infants, you can see their heart rhythms coordinate, their oxytocin levels pulse in sync. It's a deep biological dance.
That's amazing.
And it has huge long-term effects. The amount of synchrony a parent and infant have predicts the quality of that child's relationships later in life. With friends, with romantic partners, it literally shapes the architecture of the social brain.
Which tells us that the comfort we feel with certain names or people might be an echo of these synchronous, valued experiences from decades ago. But what happens when that wiring gets crossed? When familiarity becomes a trigger for danger?
And that's the dark side of this. When a name stops being a simple label and becomes a powerful neural trigger, usually because of trauma.
I read about a clinical case that illustrates this perfectly. It shows how a name can become a full-body alert system, completely outside of conscious awareness.
This is the tragic power of implicit memory. the memories your body holds that your conscious mind can't access.
So this was a woman in therapy for severe social anxiety. Her therapist started to notice a pattern. Whenever she met someone new named Michael, she would have this visceral physical reaction, a huge spike in distress.
But she didn't know why.
She had no conscious negative association with anyone named Michael in her current life. But through therapy, she uncovered this deeply buried implicit memory. The person responsible for a major childhood trauma was named Michael.
Her conscious mind had forgotten, but her nervous system hadn't. Her brain, in an effort to protect her, had done something radical. It labeled an entire common name as danger. So the name itself became a key that unlocked the full-body threat response. Fight, flight, freeze. It all comes back to the brain as a situated organ.
What do you mean by a situated organ?
The brain doesn't develop in a vacuum. It's shaped by its environment, by its proximity to a caregiver's body. An infant's brain is organized by the caregiver's heart rhythm, their stress levels, their touch. If that early environment is chaotic or threatening, the brain organizes itself to anticipate threat. And simple cues, like a name, can get hardwired as danger signals.
A danger map drawn on the brain. But the brain is also incredibly plastic. Can that kind of wiring be repaired?
Yes. And this is the most hopeful part of this whole field. Because the social brain is so plastic, later, healthy attachments can genuinely reorganize those neural networks.
How does that work biologically?
A good relationship with a partner, a friend, a therapist acts as a new attachment system. It helps you remap those networks. Therapy, in the sense, is a social environment that helps connect your higher-level cortical structures, your reasoning brain, with your lower-level limbic system, your emotional brain.
So the therapeutic relationship provides a safe, reliable space that can literally teach the emotional brain that Michael doesn't have to mean danger anymore.
Precisely. It allows the brain to learn a new pattern of safety, overriding the old protective habit loop. It shows the incredible long-term continuity of these patterns. The quality of our first attachments echoes throughout our lives, but later relationships give us a critical chance to reorganize and heal.
So this whole deep dive really comes back to where we started. The names in my phone, the people we trust, the brands we buy. It's all governed by this complex system operating just out of sight.
It is. We started with names clustering in your contacts, that secret election. And now we know it isn't fate. It's the brain's relentless drive for efficiency, for cognitive fluency, layered on top of a deep neurobiological system that links familiarity directly to value and safety.
And we've seen how that same mechanism that makes us trust a Kim or hire a Jameses also makes us choose Sinclair over Ethelgard. And critically, how it can turn a common name into a threat trigger for someone with a history of trauma.
The single biggest insight here is recognizing just how automatic and powerful the pull of familiarity is. It's our brain constantly borrowing trust or caution from the past based on nothing more than a label.
And knowing that gives you a critical tool. It gives you awareness. You now have the capacity to see that secret election happening and to interrupt it. You can move past that easy, low-friction preference and choose to verify the value of the person or the product in front of you right now, based on reality, letting them set their own record instead of just running on the borrowed history you have stored in your head.